I'm a trained drama therapist.
Oh, wow, okay.
And I was working in the NHS for a long time. I'd set up a loss and bereavement psychotherapy service for people with learning disabilities, and that's still going, and I moved here from there.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge issue, but I think that really we need to think perhaps a little bit back before we get to the point at which people need to be sent to the ATUs, seem to end up in ATUs, because I think we've got a lot of things that we need to change in our thinking and our delivery of services to people that make that a big issue.
Yeah.
So even so far back as schools and supporting families, and perhaps understanding young people with learning disabilities and or autism and their development, and how we perhaps need to support them before things get to a point at which it's much harder to support them. Well, I think again because we haven't thought proactively enough. So I think if we could put better support in around families earlier, families wouldn't get to a breaking point at which they need such an enormous amount of help, or that they can't cope anymore with a family member with a learning disability as things start to become so difficult. But I also think that perhaps because we're not addressing the emotional lives of people with learning disabilities and their anxiety, often the things that lead to the crisis point are that person's anxiety about so many changes that might be happening around them, or the situation they find themselves in. If we could recognise that we actually earlier on could support people in their emotional development, perhaps people wouldn't go into such crisis in the first point. And that's very much where we're coming from in thinking about the workshop that we're going to run. Again, starting right back in schools, if we can attend to the emotional development and those kind of milestones that often get missed in terms of building relational ways of supporting people, that would be very important. But also if we help our care support staff to understand responses to trauma, because quite often young people may be reminded of a situation where perhaps they were restrained in a way that made them feel very frightened, and they think they're going to get into that situation again, and that sometimes may be how a challenging situation happens. So I think we need to rethink the whole situation and retrain our support staff, our teaching staff, our social care staff differently. Well, there's a wonderful school. In fact, we have the headmistress from the parent teacher who's set up the school called Bright Futures, who's going to present part of our workshop. And she has a school for young people with autism and learning disabilities. And the whole focus of that school is about recognising the developmental milestones that the young people miss out on, in a sense, because of their disability. And ensuring that those are met as part of the teaching and part of the syllabus, so that the whole school works in that way. And they're enabling the young people to develop their own better coping strategies and relational ways of being in the world. Okay, so we have it's broken into 4 specific presentations. The first one will be on this method of working with young people in a school in Bright Futures, which is very much about a relational developmental approach. We also will have one of our psychotherapists from Respond talking about how we work with and support people with learning disabilities and or autism who have experienced trauma of some sort, whether it was in an ATU, whether it was some other kind of trauma, and how we can, through that therapy enable them to learn better, much deeper ways of managing and coping with anxiety in the world. And we have a parent speaking about their experience for their family member in an ATU and the impact upon their family. And then we also have somebody from Justice Together, which is a combination of small charities and families who have been supporting parents and developing a model of supporting families when somebody does have a crisis and ends up in an ATU, and how we support that whole family to get their family member out of the ATU and properly well settled back into an ordinary life. Well, it's a great opportunity for people to come together, both social professionals, care professionals, families, and learn what is on offer out there, what different approaches there are, what different ways there are to think about the support